There was a sock in the fridge. Not even a pair, just one, stuffed behind the carton of oat milk like it was hiding from something. And somehow, that's what broke me. Not the hotel receipt I found 3 nights ago, tucked under the passenger seat of her car. Not the unfamiliar cologne on her coat. Not the fact that she started calling me Bud instead of Babe. No, it was the sock in the fridge. Mine probably. Or maybe his. She was upstairs, laughing through her earbuds. Probably FaceTiming the guy. I don't know his name. I didn't want to know. I just stood there, fridge door open, the sock hanging between the yogurts like it was mocking me. And that's when it happened. That's when I realized she wasn't coming back, because she'd already left. I just hadn't noticed. I went upstairs. Not to yell. Not to confront. I just stood in the hallway and waited for her to finish her conversation. She saw me. She didn't flinch. What she said, annoyed. I looked at her. Really looked. And said, I found the sock. She blinked. Okay. I guess, I said, that's all I needed. She rolled her eyes. Lowell, don't get dramatic. You've always made everything more complicated than it is. And then she said it. You don't mean anything to me anymore. Can you just go? That was it. No tears. No explanation. No regret. Just that. I didn't say a word. I walked out, got in my car, and drove. No destination. No plan. Just the thudding sound of my heart trying to process what my brain already knew. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt most. It was how easy it was for her. But the part that still haunts me? The sock wasn't mine. I drove for 6 hours without music, without stopping. The highway blurred into itself, lines, lights, loops, and I didn't even notice I had missed my exit 3 times. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind kept replaying her face. Not her words. Those were simple. Cruel, yes, but simple. It was the way she looked at me when she said them, like I was a beige wall in a rental apartment. Forgettable. Featureless. Easy to walk past. I pulled into a rest stop around midnight, parked between 2 semis, and sat there in the dark. I wasn't crying. I should have cried. But the thing is, there comes a moment when pain gets so big, so overwhelming, that it stops hurting. It just hums. It becomes background noise, like a fridge running or a train passing in the distance. That's when I opened the glove box and pulled out my notebook. Yeah, I keep a notebook. Judge me. It's not for poetry or sketches, nothing fancy. Just thoughts. Random bits I jot down so I don't lose them. Grocery lists. Reminders. Once, a dream I had about a raccoon giving me relationship advice. But that night, I flipped to a blank page and wrote, sock and fridge. Not mine. Neither is the house. Or her. Or my own reflection anymore. I stared at it for a while. Then I added, don't go back. She already packed emotionally. You're just catching up. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train groaned, and I almost laughed. There I was, a 42-year-old man in a 2008 Ford Fusion, scribbling heartbreak into a notebook like a sad indie movie character. And then, my phone buzzed. It was her. Not a call. A message. Hey, don't forget to pick up your stuff. I left it all in the garage. I need space. No, sorry. No, I hope you're okay. Just logistics. And that's when I finally let myself say it out loud, whispering into the steering wheel, she's gone, Lowell. And she didn't even close the door on her way out. The next day, I drove back not to her, but to the house I'd been paying for. To the life I thought we shared. The garage was open. My things were in a pile like I'd died and someone had cleaned out my room. On top of the pile, my favorite hoodie, the one she always stole when she was cold. Folded on top of it was a sticky note. You forgot this. I stood there, holding the hoodie, staring at that note like it was a bullet. And that's when I noticed something odd, a smell. Faint, but familiar. Cologne. Expensive. Definitely not mine. I walked toward the house and peeked through the window. And there, on the couch where we used to watch documentaries and eat popcorn, was a wine glass and a man's jacket. She had company. She hadn't even waited 24 hours. My name was still on the mortgage. My toothbrush was still in the bathroom. My dog, no, our dog, was probably asleep in a crate upstairs. And she had another man's jacket on my couch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break the window and drag him out by the collar and ask her, really? This fast? But I didn't. I walked away. Not because I was strong, but because for the first time, I realized I'd been holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. Maybe never did. Still, I wasn't prepared for what came next. 2 days later, I got an email from our neighbor. Not a message of sympathy. Not a, hey, I heard you moved out, are you okay? No. It was a video. And what I saw in that video shattered whatever was left of my illusion. The email subject line simply read, "You deserve to know." No explanation. No message body. Just a single video file attached, backyard_footage_10-22.mp4. I sat on the edge of the motel bed staring at it, my stomach turning knots. It was from Chuck, our next-door neighbor. The same Chuck who always waved too much and overwatered his lawn like it was a full-time job. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. For a second, I considered deleting it. I was already unraveling, sleep-deprived, eating chips for dinner, talking to the ceiling like it owed me answers. But my hand clicked play before my brain caught up. The video opened on a grainy, slightly tilted view of Chuck's backyard. His security camera, obviously the kind old people install because they've watched too many crime shows. It was night. Dim porch light. A wind chime swinging lazily. Nothing unusual at first. Then the back gate opened. It was Vanessa. She stepped into view wearing the hoodie I'd left in the garage. My hoodie. She looked casual. Comfortable. Like she was home. Except, she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, tall, younger than me, dressed like he'd stepped out of a fitness ad. No urgency. No secrecy. Just a calm stroll across the lawn, straight toward the back patio door. And then, right there on my doormat, she turned, laughed at something he whispered, and kissed him. Not a nervous, guilty kiss. A long, familiar one. She knew he was being filmed. She knew Chuck had cameras. Everyone on our street did. But she didn't care. That kiss told me everything. This wasn't new. This wasn't a rebound. This was established. Routine. Practiced. I paused the video. I didn't need to see more. But curiosity, or maybe some self-destructive instinct, made me scrub forward. A new scene. Inside the house now, lights flickering through the blinds. I could barely see, but there was movement. Laughter. Shadows of two people who had built a world without me while I was still living in the same house. It was surreal. Like watching footage of your own funeral and seeing your spouse flirting at the wake. I shut the laptop and just sat there. And then, the door of the motel room opened. Not because someone had a key. Because I had forgotten to lock it. A cleaning lady stood there, holding fresh towels, awkward and unsure. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I waved her off, too numb to speak. She apologized again, gently closed the door, and I was left staring at that flimsy lock. It felt metaphorical. Somehow, my entire marriage had been like that. Doors left unlocked, boundaries unguarded, an open invitation for someone else to walk in. I barely slept that night. My thoughts weren't just on her, or the guy, or the betrayal. It was the feeling of being erased. Like I had never mattered. Like I was just the filler between the life she wanted and the life she finally took. And yet, the next morning, I found myself doing something incredibly pathetic. I drove back to the house. Not to confront. Not to scream. I parked across the street like a creep, sat in the car, and watched from a distance, desperate to feel something familiar. Maybe hoping she'd step outside and look lost. Maybe hoping I'd see some trace of regret on her face. But when she finally came out, she looked radiant. Hair brushed. Sunglasses. Coffee in one hand, keys in the other. She laughed at something on her phone, probably a message from him, then got into her car and drove off, music blaring. And I sat there in my car, parked in the shadow of what used to be my home, feeling like I'd been replaced by a better version of everything I thought I was. But here's where it gets strange. Later that evening, I received another message, not from Chuck this time, but from someone I never expected, Vanessa's sister. She simply wrote, "Call me. It's urgent. You don't know half of it." And that's when I realized. This story wasn't over. In fact, I may have been the only one not playing a part in something far more twisted. At first, I didn't believe it was real. Vanessa's sister, Darla, and I hadn't spoken in years, not since that disastrous Thanksgiving when she got into a screaming match with her ex in our kitchen, broke one of my grandmother's china plates, and swore off turkey for life. She always had this chaotic energy, the kind that made you feel like something was about to explode even when things were calm. Vanessa called her emotionally feral. I always figured that meant she'd be the last person to call me after our separation. But there it was, "Call me. It's urgent. You don't know half of it." Against my better judgment, I dialed her number. She picked up before the first ring finished. "Lowell," she asked, her voice tight, nervous. "Are you alone?" I told her yes, even though I was still in the car across the street from the house I used to live in. "I'm going to tell you something, And you need to listen all the way through before you say anything, okay? My stomach flipped. Okay. She took a breath. Vanessa's been seeing that guy Brady for over a year. I said nothing. A year? That would have meant birthdays, holidays, family dinners, all of them layered with deceit I hadn't noticed. But it's worse than that, Darla went on. It wasn't just cheating. It was planned. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean they talked about replacing you. Like, casually. Like it was a project. She told me back in February that she was going to slowly ease you out of the picture. She said you'd barely notice. She said that to you? I croaked. She laughed about it. I thought she was being dramatic. You know how she gets. But then she stopped answering my calls, blocked me on social media, even uninvited me from your anniversary dinner. I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. I felt nauseous. Why are you telling me this now? Darla hesitated. Because she's pregnant. Silence. I heard it. I registered it. But I couldn't process it. Pregnant? Her? With him? She told Mom last week, Darla added. Said she and Brady are going to start over. But here's the real reason I'm calling you. The house? It's in both your names, right? Yeah. Well, she's trying to refinance it behind your back. I don't know how, but I overheard her telling Brady she's gonna make sure you sign it away before you even realize what's happening. I froze. She's going to send you papers, Darla continued, claiming it's for the divorce settlement. But they're not. Don't sign anything. I couldn't breathe. I looked across the street at the house, my house, the porch light just clicking on with that warm glow that used to feel like home. Now it felt like a trap. She's not who you think she is, Lowell, Darla said softly. I know you still want to believe she's just confused or caught up in something stupid, but she's calculated. Cold. I've known it for years. You were just safe. Too safe. And she resented that. The line went quiet. And in that silence, I felt the last piece of me come undone. She'd made a blueprint of my exit before I even knew I was leaving. And all I had done, all I ever did, was love her without question. I thanked Darla, hung up, and sat there staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired, hollow, like someone halfway between who they were and who they're about to become. Then I made a choice. No more waiting. No more mourning a woman who erased me like an old file. It was time to show her what silence really looked like. But before I could move forward, I needed to go back. Not to her, but to someone I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My father. Because what Vanessa didn't know, what even I had forgotten, was that I had options she never accounted for. And she was about to find out. I never thought I'd call him again. My father and I had fallen out over something stupid, a fight about a loan I didn't want and pride I wouldn't let go of. 15 years of silence sat between us like a brick wall neither of us had the guts to climb. He lived out in the hills of northern Wyoming now, a recluse with a long beard, solar panels, and no tolerance for drama. We used to joke that he belonged in a mountain survivalist documentary. Now it just felt accurate. But I needed him. Not for money. Not for a place to stay. I needed clarity. Perspective. He was the only person I knew who had walked away from everything once and never looked back. My mother, his business, his friends, all gone in one clean break. I used to think it made him cruel. Now I wasn't so sure. So I sat in that dim, cold motel room, took a breath, and called him. The phone rang once. Lowell. His voice cracked like gravel. You okay? That alone almost undid me. I need to talk, I said. Can I come up? I'll put the kettle on. 12 hours and a flat tire later, I pulled into his driveway, a twisted gravel path lined with snow-dusted trees and rusted wind chimes. His cabin looked exactly as I remembered it, weather-beaten, stubbornly upright, and surrounded by silence. He stepped out onto the porch in his flannel shirt and boots, looking at me like I was still 12 and holding a broken science fair project. We didn't hug. That wasn't our thing. But he held the door open longer than necessary, and I felt the warmth from inside spill out like an invitation. We talked for hours. No TV. No distractions. Just 2 chairs, a wood stove, and years of unspoken history between us. I told him everything. The sock. The video. The man. The baby. The house. Darla's warning. My voice broke somewhere around the part where I described seeing her laugh with another man on the porch I built. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. And when I finally ran out of words, he just nodded once and said, "You waited too long to get mad." That stunned me. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, wounded. You saw the cracks, son. You just told yourself they were part of the design. You loved her too much to admit she stopped loving you. I hated how right that felt. We spent the next 2 days in that cabin. I split firewood. He showed me how to trap rabbits, like it was the most normal thing in the world. We talked less, moved more, breathed slower. And during one of those silences, he handed me a battered folder. "What's this?" I asked. "Back when you said no to the loan, I invested the money anyway," he said. "Did pretty well with it. You're listed as co-owner." I opened the folder and blinked. Property deeds. A small storage facility. A 2-bedroom rental unit in Montana. A modest cabin with a lake view. "You kept all this?" I asked. "It was always yours. I just figured you'd come find it when you needed it." I felt my throat tighten. "Start over," he said. "But not the way she did. Not with lies. Build something real." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. No dreams. No ghosts. Just quiet. When I woke up the next morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going back to Des Moines to fight. I wasn't going to scream or demand or beg. I was going back to quietly take what was mine and leave her with nothing she didn't earn. The kind of silence that echoes. But before I left, I got one more message, this time from an unknown number. It said only this: "You don't know who Brady really is. Look deeper." And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup. I stared at that message for 10 minutes before I moved. "You don't know who Brady really is. Look deeper." No signature. No context. Just those 8 words that made everything. The cheating, the coldness, the quick shift to a new life feel even more rehearsed than I had feared. I didn't have a plan. I just had paranoia, which, at that point, felt like a survival skill. I loaded my things into the car, thanked my dad in the only way we knew how, with a firm handshake and a nod, and began the long drive back to Des Moines, not to plead with Vanessa or retrieve forgotten belongings. I was going back as a ghost, a watcher. I needed to see them, not speak, not engage, just watch, and then dig. The storage unit my dad had left me in Montana? I'd already called and transferred ownership. The rental cabin near the lake. Now in my name. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an empty page, and for the first time in my life, I was holding the pen. I got back into town just before dark and parked 2 blocks from the house. I didn't go near it yet. Instead, I drove to the law firm handling our divorce and requested all the documents Vanessa had submitted. The clerk, a young guy with glasses and an apologetic smile, hesitated until I pulled out my ID and proof I was still legally married and co-owner of the home. He printed everything. It came out in one thick stack. I took it back to the motel, locked the door, and began to read. At first, it was all expected. Claims of emotional neglect, laughable, that I had voluntarily vacated the property. I left after she told me I was nothing, and some inflated estimations of her financial contributions. Then I saw his name, Brady Allen Griggs, listed as a witness to the character and stability of the defendant. I laughed out loud. Character and stability. Sure. Then I Googled him. Nothing major came up at first. A few social media accounts that looked like they were created recently, no job listed, no education details, just gym photos and filtered selfies with vague captions like grind mode and feeling blessed. Something didn't sit right. I reverse image searched his photos. Some were clean, but one hit came back, not to a personal profile, but to a local news article from 2 years ago. Headline: Local fitness trainer sued for defrauding widow of $40,000. I froze. I clicked the article. There he was. Same face, same smile, just cleaner shaven and wearing a suit. The article was brief. Brady Griggs, personal trainer and lifestyle coach, had allegedly manipulated an elderly client into investing in a wellness startup that never existed. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. But the details were murky. She paid him in cash, he disappeared, and reappeared in a new city a month later. And now he was in my house, with my wife, and she was pregnant. I dug further. His address listed in the court records was fake. A co-working space mailbox. I scoured LinkedIn. Nothing. Facebook, wiped. The only consistent thing about Brady was that nothing about him was consistent. I called Darla. She picked up instantly. What now? Brady's a scammer, I said. Possibly dangerous. Possibly targeting Vanessa. Silence. Or, she said slowly, Vanessa knows. And they're working together. That hadn't occurred to me. Or maybe I hadn't wanted it to. Think about it, she continued. The fake tears, The way she's trying to push through divorce papers, the mortgage refinance, she's not rushing to start a family. She's racing to finish something. What if this whole thing was never about love? What if you were just the mark? I felt like vomiting. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my car outside the house watching for lights. Around midnight, the porch light flicked on. Vanessa stepped out onto the stoop, barefoot, phone to her ear, pacing. I cracked the window and listened. Not yet. He hasn't signed, she said, voice sharp. No, he's still ghosting. I told you, I'll get it done. Don't push me. Silence. Then, I said, don't push me, Brady. I've covered for you enough. Covered? Enough? The words looped in my head like a threat. In that moment, I realized she wasn't being fooled by him. They were fooling me together. But something was shifting between them. Tension. Cracks. And that's when a terrifying thought hit me. If Brady had conned other women before, what happens when Vanessa stops being useful to him? What happens when she becomes the next loose end? I wasn't sure who I was more afraid for anymore, her or myself. Because when you're dealing with people like this, silence isn't the only weapon. Sometimes, it's just the warning shot. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about her voice from the night before. Vanessa's tone wasn't the scared pleading of someone who had been manipulated. It was tight, angry, in control. She wasn't a pawn in Brady's game, she was a partner. But that call ended with something unsettled. She was covering for him, sure, but there was friction. Cracks. I knew that sound. I had lived it for years. That slight hesitation before a lie, the raised pitch of someone masking fear with irritation. And underneath it all, a quiet panic neither of them could afford to show. That meant I had time, but not much. I needed leverage. Something more than just accusations or old court records. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable, admissible. Something that could stop her refinancing the house, end her claim to anything I built, and maybe, if I got lucky, expose him for what he really was before he made her disappear like that widow 2 years ago. I started with the bank. I walked in like any other customer, asked to speak to the mortgage specialist, and used my legal ID and joint ownership papers to request a freeze on all refinancing or title changes. The lady behind the desk looked up at me, blinked, and said, "Actually, Mr. Tuckman, I'm glad you came in. There's a signature discrepancy we needed to clear up before moving forward." She pulled out the documents. I looked. My name was there. My signature wasn't. It was forged. Vanessa had tried to submit a mortgage modification agreement with both our signatures, mine apparently scrawled in her hand with just enough slant to fool someone not looking too hard. But they had flagged it because I had signed the original mortgage in person, and someone noticed the style didn't match. I stared at the paper, then looked back at the woman. "Please flag this as potential fraud and notify your legal department," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Also, I'll need a notarized copy of that file." She gave me a wary look. "Is everything okay, sir?" "Not yet," I said, "but it will be." From there, I went straight to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, Lance Merkley, a semi-retired PI with a gut full of bourbon and a wallet full of secrets. He owed me a favor. Once upon a time, I helped him hide a gambling debt from his wife. I told him the basics: Brady, Vanessa, forged signature, possible fraud. Lance didn't flinch. "Give me 48 hours, he said, "and stay out of sight." That night, I checked into a different motel on the edge of town. A grim little place next to a Waffle House, with flickering lights and a vending machine that gave you 2 bags of chips if you punched it just right. I sat on the edge of the bed with the forged document on the table beside me and tried to feel something. Rage, grief, disbelief, anything. But what I felt most was clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was identity theft. They hadn't just taken my love. They were trying to erase me from my own life. Lance called late the next night. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. He traced Brady's phone activity. The guy had 3 different numbers under different names, all routing through burner services. But one number had pinged frequently near a self-storage facility on the edge of town. One Vanessa had rented under her maiden name, Ellison. Lance met me there the next morning. He had a court order from a judge he knew, don't ask how, and we opened the unit together. It was supposed to be hers for seasonal decorations, according to the paperwork. Instead, we found documents. Bags of them. Files, envelopes, folders, half-shredded papers tucked in boxes labeled miscellaneous. It looked like someone had dumped the remains of 3 lives into a 10-by-10 concrete tomb. There were medical forms and other names, W-2s, tax statements, even IDs that had Brady's face, but other men's names. Fake leases, wire receipts, records of payments from women across the Midwest, some small, some massive. And tucked behind a stack of boxes was a weathered black safe. Lance worked it open with tools that definitely weren't store-bought. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Brady, with different women. Always smiling, always close. Some were grainy, some professional. In one of them, he was standing behind a woman with salt and pepper hair in a kitchen. The photo was dated a week before the fraud article I found. She was the widow. She wasn't smiling. Vanessa's handwriting was on the back of one of the photos. He always finds a way. I stared at it, mouth dry. She wasn't just a victim. She was chronicling it, cataloging it, helping. Lance whistled low. Your wife's not just in deep. She's been doing this with him for a long time. This storage unit isn't a stash. It's a graveyard. We didn't take anything. Not yet. We locked the unit, sealed the court papers inside an envelope, and drove in silence. But I knew one thing now with absolute certainty. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about money. It was about erasure, rewriting the story of my life without me in it. And they were almost done until I came back. But now I had evidence. And tomorrow, I'd walk right up to the front door of that house, look Vanessa in the eyes, and say the one sentence I'd been saving like a blade under my sleeve. I knew what they were. I just hadn't decided what to do with that power yet. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat in the motel chair by the window, documents spread out on the little desk beside me, safe files stacked in neat rows like courtroom exhibits. My entire marriage, or at least the version of it I believed in, sat right there in folders. Some pages creased, some stained. All of them false. But there was something else in that room too. Peace. Not the loud kind. Not the cinematic, music swell kind. The quiet kind that settles in your chest when the noise finally stops. After weeks of grief, rage, humiliation, I didn't feel weak anymore. I didn't feel like the abandoned man, the fool with the burned eggs and the unanswered texts. I felt clear, like someone who had walked through a fire and realized he hadn't turned to ash, just smoke. I didn't go to the house the next morning. I went to the courthouse instead, with the documents from the storage unit, Lance's report, the forged signature copy from the bank, and a sworn statement from Darla, all neatly organized in a manila envelope. I filed for an emergency injunction on the property. The clerk took one look at the paper trail and said, "You'll want to come back this afternoon. Judge'll see this personally." By sunset, the house was frozen. Legally, she couldn't refinance. She couldn't sell. She couldn't do anything. And just like that, the fake foundation she and Brady built began to crack, because it was never built on truth. It was balanced on arrogance, and I had finally kicked the last leg out from under it. Later that night, I did go back, not to argue, not to shout. I knocked on the door once, envelope in hand. Vanessa opened it, looking like she hadn't slept either. Her mascara was smudged, her hair frizzy. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "No more words," I said. "This envelope contains every reason why I will not be erased. I am not here to fight. I'm not here to listen. I'm here to give you a choice." She blinked. "You can leave quietly. Disappear with what little dignity you still have. Or you can stay and watch everything unravel while I hand this to every investigator I know." She reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. "This is not a threat. It's a truth. Something you used to think I couldn't handle." Her hand dropped. Behind her, Brady appeared in the hallway, shirtless, confused. I looked him dead in the eye. "You should pack. Storage unit number 41 says hello." He flinched. Vanessa's lips parted like she wanted to say something, justify it, maybe. But there was nothing left to say. We both knew what it was now. It was never a love story. It was a story of convenience, written in disappearing ink. I walked away. I didn't look back. And for once, she didn't call after me. 2 months later, the house sold. She never contested it. Brady vanished. Probably changed names again. But this time, I sent every file we found to a local news station anonymously. A week after, an investigative report ran under the headline, "Fitness grifter and alleged accomplice vanish after paper trail discovered." I didn't smile. I didn't need to, because I had already moved on. I live near Flathead Lake now, in that old rental cabin my dad co-owned. I turned it into a small business, kayak rentals in the summer, snowshoe tours in the winter. Nothing fancy, but mine. Mine in the way she never was. I see my father weekly. We talk more now than we ever did when I was a kid. Sometimes Darla visits. She brought a rescue dog last time. Said it reminded her of me. Anxious, loyal, and in need of structure. I named him Sock. Fitting, right? I still carry that notebook. The one I wrote in after I found the sock in the fridge. The last entry is short. She said I meant nothing. So I became everything she'll never touch again. And that's enough.